Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And this is our 2023 holiday gift episode in which we will do what we did last year, which is make recommendations about games you might give as gifts, while caveating that maybe you shouldn't do it at all.
That's exactly right. That's the premise here. We're doing it different in the sense that we asked people to give us a person, describe a person to us who you might be giving a gift to this year. And we're going to try and answer those questions, and possibly that will reflect people in your own life. And this will be helpful to you, or even you might find some games that you yourself would be interested in trying.
And I will say, Jake, as you know, kicking off these prompts, it's been really fun because I too have kind of imagined people in my life who are like, oh, this person kind of falls into this category. So it was fun thinking of what games I might recommend, while also sort of trying to stomach, like, would I recommend this game to this person really?
Right, exactly.
In terms of a gift? Yeah.
Last caveat, I want to say, like, this is definitely not 2023 games, right? This is all games included. Any game that we might suggest is a good gift for this holiday season.
So long as, pursuant with that idea, it has to be purchasable.
Yeah, I did a little Googling around.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, $356 for Dwellings of Eldervale. I am not going to recommend that one.
Let's not do that. Yeah, for sure. Or like, I could really recommend some out-of-print Knizia games, but I won't do that because why would I? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not okay.
So these games should be available to purchase.
Before we give our thoughts on other people's words, should we give our thoughts on other people's words by reading out a review on the show?
Great segue. Yeah, let's do it. So we got a new review very kindly sent in on Apple Podcasts by Sapien, and the review is titled, "Get Ready to Go Down a Rabbit Hole," a 5-star review. And Sapien said, "Are you mad about mechanisms? Would you love to know the difference between input and output randomness? Did you always feel like Reiner Knizia deserved his own theme song? Then this podcast is for you. After listening to your first episode, I guarantee you will go on a downloading spree through their back catalog."
Dang, that made me want to listen to Decision Space.
Also, just like, this is the nerdiest show of all time. Just like, would you love to know the difference between input and output randomness? It's like, I guess that is what we do here. I
am mad about mechanisms. Thank you so much for that review, Sapien. That was given on November 15th, which, you know, that's right now. This is what I'm thankful for. Reviews like this.
Heck yeah. Okay, let's get into the main topic, and I want to start out with a little discussion question. Brendan, what game do you think will be the hot game, the it game this holiday season? I think last year, for me, I can pretty definitively say that game was Ark Nova, and my evidence is that I was given that game by 2 brother-in-laws.
So I was given that game by 1 friend, which was really sweet. No, I think, Jake, it's so interesting. So this is kind of inverting our question, right? Because our episode is almost, what games might someone who has a collection of games buy someone who doesn't have as many games as them? Mm-hmm. And then this prompt is sort of like, what game might people who have a lot of games be excited about receiving if they don't have that game? I think the hot game this
is
year,
like the game that the gamers are putting on their list for somebody else.
For someone else, exactly. I think either you're just doing like the biggest brain pun of all time, or this is the year, 2023, that it works out well. Because I think the hot game this year is going to be Heat, the racing game by the people who did, you know, Flamme Rouge, the other racing game. It's all about hand management and racing around corners, hoping you don't overload your engine by pushing your luck. I think Heat's the one. What about you? What's the hot game this year?
Heat is the one that jumps immediately to mind for me as well. I think it's a great game. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about it in all corners of the board game sphere. I think it can be difficult to get. So, you know, again, caveat included, I wouldn't rush out and pay double what, you know, MSRP is for Heat. But I think it's definitely feels like the game that's going to be the biggest, hottest game this holiday season. And that's what we're all about on Decision Space.
Since we're doing this, What about Ticket to Ride Legacy?
I don't know that Ticket to Ride Legacy.
It's so lukewarm right now.
Yeah, I think Legacy itself as a mechanism is just something that is no longer like the belle of the ball.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people have purchased and not finished Legacy games at this
for
point.
sure.
So like the allure of like, this is a game you're definitely going to get a group of people to play with you 17 times is like, it turns out maybe you won't. So I think this is I've heard good things about it in our Discord, but a game for Legacy enthusiasts and Ticket to Ride enthusiasts, and maybe that Venn diagram I don't think it's going to eclipse Heat. Another game that is pretty great that is getting some buzz right now too is Apiary. Fire games. I'm seeing that a lot in our Discord. People kind of receiving that now. I think that was kind of well timed as well for a good holiday spree. I don't think it's eclipsing Heat for me and just kind of like buzz. But buzz. Speaking of buzz, maybe a B game will be hot on its tail. Wow, I'm doing accidental puns and I can't stop.
You can't stop, huh? You thought you could sneak that one past me.
Hey, this is Jake from The Edit, just jumping in to remind listeners and disclose to new listeners that I'm fortunate to call Jamie at Stonemaier Games a friend. So this is in no way a paid advertisement, but we do strive for transparency and to let our listeners know of our positive and negative biases where they may exist. Okay, back to the episode.
Beyond that, Jake, it's so interesting because in previous years, I feel like there'd be maybe even like a somewhat lighter game that was jumping to the top.
Like an Azul. I remember one year, I feel like the
Yeah.
hot game was Azul.
Right, exactly.
People were like, get this game and play it with your family at Christmas.
And no one was ever more right.
Yeah.
That would be a good fit.
That was a great recommendation at the time.
I was looking at some of the other big 2022 releases because I feel like sometimes, Ark Nova technically came out in 2021. It was big last year.
That's the other thing with like Ticket to Ride Legacy and maybe
It's
Apiary
too
new.
Yeah. But Jake, I don't know that another big game from last year that neither of us have played, Frosthaven. You can't buy someone Frosthaven as a gift.
Only if you know they love Gloomhaven and somehow don't already own Frosthaven.
Right, which there's like 6 people. Like
Yeah.
the chances that somebody who's listening to this show knows someone in that spot, it's just so unlikely. So I don't know. I think it's just Heat.
But if you know that person, what a slam dunk recommendation by us.
Anyway, one other caveat about this topic, Jake, that I think is important at the start, and I really want your legitimate thoughts on this. I think that it's if you can nail finding the right game to give someone as a gift, which is tough. It has to be a good fit. It can't, push them too far. It has to be really, you got to thread the needle, but it's almost always kinder to give the game and the teach of the game rather than just the game by itself. What do you think? And it's an offer, right? You're not forcing them. Open the game right now, sit them down. I'm going to play this game with you. It's like the game with a card in it that says, if you want me to teach you how to play this game at a future game night, I would love to do that. I'd be honored to.
Definitely. I think that's the exact right way to handle this situation of giving a game as a gift. We've talked about this before, but us as hobby board gamers, we love games, and therefore we think these are great things that other people might like too. And also we have a good knowledge base for it. So it's kind of a space where you can theoretically pick a game for almost anyone in your life. We can find the right age, we can find the right theme for whatever they're interested in. So it seems like something I've certainly been there where I'm just like, I want to give a game to everyone on my list. But not everybody thinks about games in the same way that you and I do. So that's not always wise. And I think saying, here's a game, let's play it now, that can almost be like giving somebody tickets to a show they weren't really planning on or something. It's like, okay, well, now you have to get like a babysitter or whatever. You know what I mean? You don't want to assume somebody's time too much with your gift. Mm-hmm. So I think give a game as a gift with the intention that if asked, you should be willing to like drop anything and play it right now. I wouldn't want to give a game to somebody as a gift and then they said, great, let's play it right now. And I said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the mindset we want to be at. Be willing and eager and ready to teach, but don't like assume that, all of a sudden your Christmas morning is going to be filled with playing board games with your son who's home from college or whatever.
Totally. Don't be the person who says, I know you're a Lord of the Rings fan, so I bought you War of the Ring, but I'll never play it with you, despite the fact you've never played a board game before, right?
Right. Yes.
Don't be cast out to sea like that.
That advice only goes for hobbyists. If
Yeah.
you're somebody who's listening to this episode because you're a mother and your son's into board games, and
Which
you found this because you thought, oh, I looked up holiday gifts and what are board gamers saying are good gifts. That does
any of
not
these.
apply to you. You don't have
Yeah,
to. You don't have
totally.
to follow that advice. That's for the real nerds that listen to this show every week.
And thank goodness for you saying that, Jake. Also, I feel like if you're in that seat, almost any of the games we mentioned today would probably be games that would make good gifts. So if one sounds interesting, that's good. It's good.
And the true gift that you can give the board gamer in your life is like willingness and eagerness to get excited and to play a game with them.
Totally.
So that's really all we want on the board gamer side of things. So with that set aside, Brendan, let's jump in to our main topic and answer some of these questions. Do you want to read out the first one?
Yeah, let's do
It's
it.
kind of like, what are these? Like, these are almost like little case studies, or like not a case study, like an example.
Yeah. It's a little
Prompt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a prompt. It's a case study. I think those two things capture it well. Okay. Friend has 2 kids, I think 8 and 5 years old, recently got into playing miniatures. They play a large variety of board games. Oh, painting miniatures, not just into painting them too. That's really cute. They play a large variety of board games from Dune Imperium to Gizmos. Wow. They have a modest collection that includes Mice and Mystics. I feel like this one feels like it was like written perfectly to prompt because there's so many things we could glom onto. Also, for listeners, know that both Jake and I have laid out our recommendations, but blanked them out from one another. So it's kind of like a surprise reveal.
My recommendation for this one is, I kind of have 2 here, and I really tried to keep these just to one, but this one has a caveat. So the first recommendation I have is Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. So this is a great, cooperative adventure style game, but it does have a horror theme, which might be a bit much for a 5-year-old. I think that, it could be played in a way that's more fun and fanciful. We've talked about getting scared in games, and I don't think that's something that games really deliver well. So I wouldn't really worry about a game like this being too scary for a 5-year-old that's willing to play. But clearly, I'm not a parent, so maybe I'm just way off base here, and parents may think that this is just way too much for a 5 and 8-year-old. So my second recommendation would be the Warhammer Underworlds series, which is also a very violent game system, but it doesn't have like the overt like story element to where like you're reading something that might be gruesome or violent. It's more of just like purely a strategy game. And so Warhammer Underworlds, I think that would be a better recommendation for a kid that was like really into Magic the Gathering, so maybe more for the 8-year-old than the 5-year-old. But I think these are both just like really fun games spanning different sides of the board game hobby, and both have miniatures that are, I think you could get a lot of mileage out of just having the miniatures included in the box to paint. So those are my recommendations.
Lovely. My recommendation, Jake, is Marvel United, a 2020 cooperative game by Eric Lang that is, I think, almost perfect for this situation because it's cooperative. So the 5-year-old can come along for the ride, but participate as much as they are able to. Still feel like they are playing the game with their family members. It also comes with a slew of miniatures in this sort of chibi Marvel style. I don't think most Marvel things are chibi, but it's a chibi style of Marvel characters. And I know that this is something that people really enjoy painting. The miniatures are sort of cute and fanciful, and also just detailed enough that I don't paint miniatures, but I imagine if your 8-year-old was getting into painting miniatures, these might be fun ones to paint with them. And the other nice thing about this, besides it being a co-op that's sort of scalable, is that if the 3 of you, or the 3 of the people you were buying this gift for, really got into it, they could get even more into it because there's just tons of boxes of Marvel United characters and I think different villains that you can add to expand the game. This isn't one I've played, but it's one I've seen people who have kids love and enjoy playing with them.
That's a great recommendation.
Sweet.
And it's way better than mine, which has like sculptures of like people like
Chainsaws?
Beheading each other. Like literally. Like, and now I'm painting the little skulls everywhere that are like littering the ground.
Well,
and the blood spatter. So cute. So I think that's a great recommendation, Brendan. And I think it's much better than mine. So I think I'll switch my vote over to you for that category. But maybe, if you find yourself in that enjoying painting and have a slightly older age group, then I think you could do much worse than my recommendations, which are game systems that I can vouch for, as well as I've played both and enjoy them quite a lot.
I think that there's probably also an 8-year-old out there who's really into spooky games or like spooky things who would adore.
That was like when I was getting into Magic, and like the edgy art was totally like part
An
of the
appeal.
appeal, especially the Magic cards at that time with some like pretty dark and
Yeah, for sure.
dark and gruesome stuff. All right, I'll read the next one. So, my brother plays a lot of Catan with his friends. He enjoys most of my games, but does not have a collection himself. He's 24 and moves around pretty frequently, so probably doesn't want anything too big. What else can I give him that he and his friends will enjoy?
Okay, should I go first this time?
Yeah, you go first, because I read the
Okay, I think I have 2 games I want to recommend to this brother who plays a ton of Catan with his friends and doesn't want a game that's too big. Number 1, The Resistance. The Resistance just packs so many fun memories into a small box. And I think if I was 24 and moving around a ton and didn't want a big box, it would be on my list of games I would just, it's not going away from my collection.
And The Resistance is a social deduction style game like Werewolf or Mafia, something that a lot of people are already familiar with. So I think that goes a long way too, to being something that you can.
It's very approachable.
Introduce new people to. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, my number 2 is Modern Art. Modern Art is an auction game in which you are bidding on different paintings throughout these sort of 5 different rounds. I think it's a push in terms of the complexity of a game. So your brother would have to be game for learning a rule set and teaching his friends. But there's something about the objective of a game just being the player with the most money at the end that I think really resonates with people, whether or not they've played games a lot or a little. And auctions as a core mechanism, while they can be a little punishing, makes sense to people who haven't played a lot of games. You can say, oh, we're just doing an auction, and people know what auctions are. Modern Art's also fun. It has a dramatic reveal, and it creates a table presence unlike many other games. So again, my 2 recommendations: Modern Art, if you think your brother wants something a little thinkier, maybe a little longer, or The Resistance if you think that he'd be into something really social and bombastic and something you could play 2 or 3 times in a night if a group liked it.
Awesome. Great recommendations. For me, I'm going to suggest Raiders of the North Sea.
Nice.
This is a game I personally love giving as a gift because it's a game that people can kind of get into and start having fun with right away. From their first play, the mechanism of being a worker placement game where you're going to place one worker and pick up another worker is it like immediately puts the fun decisions right in front of you, in that the game tells you I have to make a strategic choice, and then I also have to plan for what my next choice is going to be on a future turn. So I think that makes it a game that's really, it makes the fun decision space of it really approachable. And I think the theme is something that's also attention grabbing. You've got a board that shows areas sprawled out to the north. As you go raiding, you're going further afield, trying to get into tougher and tougher buildings. And there is a slight element of rolling dice when you're doing that raiding action, which might not add a lot to the decision space, but it adds a ton to the exciting stand-up moments that this game can offer. So I don't think it's the best game in the world, but I do think it might be the best game for transitioning somebody away from Catan to a more modern kind of worker placement style of Eurogame.
This is like brilliant, Jake, because I gave 2 answers that were like totally not what you just did, which is if someone likes Catan and they want to play another Euro game, Raiders of the North Sea might be the best next step possible. That's like strategic. It's just it's the bumping mechanism of I take the worker, but then I get the worker.
There's a little bit of the interaction, right? They'll still feel like
Totally.
they're interacting with each other by blocking. There's even a little bit of take that with some of the Vikings you can discard in the town center space or whatever it is. So yeah, and I've just found I have plenty of anecdotes in my life of introducing it to people, and then they're like,
it goes over really well.
It goes over well, especially with people that are kind of like coming into the hobby and maybe not quite as experienced. I find that it's a game that those people end up often picking up.
It's also one that would be really fun to play with someone who likes games and wants to play more and learn more. The bumping mechanism of the workers is one that I know if I hadn't played a lot of games before, I'd be like, oh, that's so cool. I need to see how this plays out.
Yeah, if you are interested in picking this one up, I think it's definitely still available, but there's a new Viking edition of the game, which I think is like the target version that maybe doesn't have all the wooden components that the
Mm,
original game has. So that might make it cheaper, but I would just be aware of that. And I might be misstating that, but be aware that there's two versions, same game, but I think one is effectively like a more premium version.
interesting. Which is not necessarily that Viking version, right, Jake? Just to be super
Yeah,
clear.
right.
Okay, awesome. So the next prompt is, one of my siblings hasn't played a real board game since we were kids together. Said sibling has 3 adult children and a spouse who see each other often. They travel a lot too. What's something portable, easy entry, and family friendly for a non-board game family?
So I guess that's me first. So the game I want to recommend to this family is a card game called Spicy. If
Okay.
you haven't heard of Spicy, it is a game that borrows a lot from the game I learned growing up called Bullshit.
Mm,
I think maybe families just call it BS, where you play with a standard deck of cards. And when it's your turn, you have to essentially play the next value higher. So, Brent, if you play a 2 to me, that means I have to play a 3,
mm,
and I can play any number of threes as I want from my hand, but you play everything face down. And if anybody says BS or bullshit, then the cards are revealed. If what you said was true, then they have to take the whole pile. If what you said was wrong, you have to take the whole pile, and you would play until one person runs out of cards to win the game. It's a really fun game, especially for families, but it has a lot of inherent problems with the design, namely that it can just drag on forever because in order to actually win the game, since everybody will always call BS on you when it's your last card, things just have to happen to line up perfectly so that you happen to have the exact card you need when it's your turn to go. Not great. So Spicy uses this exact same game design where you'll be playing cards face down, upping the ante each time, but it just goes a certain number of rounds and you're actually trying to collect piles for points. And then the game will
mm.
end once kind of the end card has been drawn out of the deck, keeping it a really nice, manageable 15-minute runtime or whatever. And the other slight twist is instead of just values on cards, there are 3 types of pepper. So I think there's like wasabis, black peppers, and chili peppers. So when you play a card, you have to say 9 of chilies. And when your opponent calls BS on you, they have to say whether you're lying about the number
Mm,
or the suit, which makes it as so there's actually an extra decision on both sides. So you could play the perfect card if you had it, or you could try and play on suit or on value. So
and sneak it through.
it just ups the. I mean, it's still a very kind of lucky, fun, random, fast playing family game, but I think it just takes that BS formula and just improves it in every way. And in doing so, still keeps everything that makes it fun, approachable, and familiar to a non gaming family.
Nice. That's awesome. So my recommendation, Jake, is also a card game because I think card games make really nice entry points, and it's Sushi Go. Sushi Go is just a light drafting card game in which you are having a hand of cards that you're taking one card from and passing all of those cards to one of your neighbors at the table. You're going to be trying to collect cards of similar types. Because you might need 2 of a kind or 3 of a kind to get them to pay off, or maybe you want the most of a certain kind and you get a certain number of points in that round. It's light. It's really adorable. It's easy to learn and play, and it's something that you can jump in and out of games of easily. So if someone in this group of 5 maybe wants to play one game but doesn't want to stick around for the full suite, they could just bow out of the next game, and because it scales so nicely, everyone who's still there could keep playing. I think Sushi Go is also just like funny at times. You can really make decisions that burn you in a way that you feel like you earned your loss, or also make decisions where you feel like you really earned your win in a way that's pleasant and fun. I think especially maybe for folks who haven't played a ton of games lately, but would like to get into them a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a great recommendation. I was recently talking to a colleague who said that her and her husband had been recently playing Sushi Go. with I think their daughter kind of every night, and I think the daughter's like something like 5 years old. So it's been kind of a fun way. They're gamers, so it's been a fun way to kind of teach strategies and sort of like, kind of like the kid is just having fun playing the game and but not winning really. So they're kind of slowly starting to kind of be like, well, why did you make that decision? Versus this other
Yeah,
decision type of thing. So I think it's nice, a nice game for that. That can kind of just be like a silly, fun time. But also, as we explored in our episode on it, for people who are gamers, there's plenty there to kind of like dig your teeth into and try and like, have a fun strategic time too.
totally. Sushi Go is a game we have an episode on. We spent an hour talking about it, but also is a game that I have family friends who, when they first learned that I had a podcast about board games with Jake, they said, "Oh, like board games like Sushi Go?" And I said, "Yeah, exactly just like that." Where, not Catan or Ticket to Ride was their entry or Pandemic, but it was Sushi Go.
Yeah. I think out of our two recommendations, which I think are both great recommendations for the prompt, one thing maybe just to be aware of, I think Sushi Go is the one that looks more like a board game. So if
Mm,
somebody's like really adverse to like playing a hobby board game for whatever reason, I mean, both of these are, very featherweight and light.
yeah,
I think Sushi Go looks a little bit less like numbers on cards,
classic card game. Yeah,
than Spicy. So, I know your audience. I think both these are great recommendations. But I think if like you're the people that you're looking to really like see themselves as non-gamers, then Spicy would be a better recommendation. No offense, but I'm gonna pick myself on that one. So that's 1-1.
no, I hear you. I hear you. I think we've done what? Isn't that? Oh wait, it is. That's only two. Wow, we're amazing.
No, we've
No,
done
that's three.
three. We've done three, but the other was a tie.
It was a
So
tie. Okay, it was a
yeah,
tie.
yeah.
Great,
Okay.
great. Tiebreaker.
My wife, a teacher, 3 kids, had her mother pass away this year. Lots of change, but an incredibly generous spirit is looking to act as a surrogate for her cousin. Lots of 2-player card games, but also loves terraforming Mars and Antiplano. Antiplano. I don't know. So this person enjoys big, heavy, long games mixed with lighter fare and games with smaller footprint. So kind of all over the place. Brendan, what did you put for this prompt?
Okay, I have 3 games to recommend this time, Jake,
Wow.
which might be cheating, but there's a lot.
We'll let the listeners decide.
It's a lot of yeah. There's a lot in this prompt. Okay, so I think Cascadia would be a really good fit. Cascadia is sort of a medium weight tile placement game in which you are drafting 2 things at once from this shared tableau. That's either you're drafting animal tiles that are paired with a terrain tile. So you're always having to make these interesting decisions around a concession somewhere. You're probably never going to get the perfect match. So you're always trying to navigate this tough puzzle. I think it's really approachable. I've played it with my dad, who I would say in the last 30 years has played approximately probably 5 board games, all with me, and then maybe 6. And he enjoyed it. It was not difficult for him to get up to speed. And it's also something my wife and I have played 100 times. I think another thing is My City is another game I'd like to recommend potentially to this individual, especially if they wanted a game to play with this cousin over and over again. My City is a polyomino laying game. Polyominoes, of course, are kind of like tetronomos from Tetris, in which you are playing them to a shared board. You can play My City either as a single sitting game with its Eternal game, or you could play it over and over again in a legacy game version where every time you play, there's slightly different rules as prescribed by this little booklet that are easy to digest. But it and you collect sort of different things throughout these 24 plays of the game. They each take maybe around 20 minutes. So you can play 2 or 3 times in a sitting. And then at the end of it, there's a shared winner, but really the winner is anyone who played the game together, because it's a really memorable, fun game experience. That I think could work well in that context. And then my final recommendation would just be The Fox in the Forest, this 2-player only trick-taking game in which you are trying to play cards in 3 different suits, where the odd cards have these special powers that are dynamic and fun. But the twist of the game is you either want to win, basically, whenever you look at your hand, you have to decide, could I win? Am I going to win lots of tricks, or do I want to win no tricks? Because if you win no tricks, that means your opponent won all the tricks, which makes them greedy, so they can't score any points. And if you don't manage to win no tricks at all, then you probably messed up because your opponent probably has nailed the sweet spot where they're scoring 7 or 8 tricks and doing really well. So it's just a fun, light card game that's dynamic and sort of wistful. And I think anyone who grew up playing any card games at all can get into it fairly quickly. What's your recommendation, Jake, for this?
Yeah,
Teacher,
I had
wife,
a
3
hard
kids.
time with this. I was going to
Yeah.
recommend a couple of different things, maybe a long game, which I might have
Mm.
put a Feast for Odin as like
Whoa.
kind of like an epic kind of engine builder, which I was getting a lot out of sort of terraforming Mars and Antiplano or kind of engine
Interesting.
building elements, but also kind of like thematic and exploratory. So I think that one, I was a 2-player card game that feels like a quick playing card game. It feels like a heavy game. I was going to pick Riftforce.
Mm.
The game I want to recommend is actually Planet Unknown.
What's Planet Unknown, Jake?
So Planet Unknown is a polyomino placing game where you are filling up a planet. Every time you place a tile, you'll move up on 2 of 5 different tracks corresponding with the resources printed on that tile. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg because Planet Unknown has just all kinds of insane things that happen as you start adding in asymmetric player boards, asymmetric tracks, asymmetric goals, buildings you're trying to fill up, etc. So I think there's something about Planet Unknown. We've been playing it a lot lately. I think it's really fun at 2 players, just quick playing back and forth, very tactical. There's a ton to dig into in terms of just the amount of content. We've been playing on Board Game Arena, so there's a lot of content there. I don't know if all of it is included in the base box of the game or not. I think maybe some of that stuff on Board Game Arena is Kickstarter stuff, but who knows? But I've just been having a super fun time, Brendan, playing that game with you. And I think somebody who likes kind of something that feels like you're kind of building something up, there's a good sense of kind of completionism that happens in a game of Planet Unknown. Where you fill up your board. Somebody who likes a quick playing game. I think it can kind of fit into all that category. So that's my sort of one recommendation that sort of encompasses a lot of what I'm hearing in this comment. And I think it might be a big hit with this person. Dang it, I messed up my own rule. After recording this episode, I looked up Planet Unknown and it is currently out of print. So unfortunately, it might be quite difficult to track down this holiday season.
I think Planet Unknown is wonderful. We're definitely going to cover it on a future show. I'm not going to give you the win on this. I think it's a tie again. But I will say Planet Unknown's a great recommendation. And whether you're going to go, I think polyominoes are just approachable. They're kind of like cards in their own way, just culturally with the footprint that they have as a game playing piece, mostly thanks to Tetris. And I think you couldn't go wrong with Planet Unknown or My City or Cascadia or The Fox in the Forest.
I think Planet Unknown is also just a game that, yes, your games are really good too. Cascadia, I think, I'll say Cascadia and Planet Unknown both are games that I think fall into a category that probably has a lot of universal appeal.
Yeah.
I think Cascadia is a game that you could probably slot into many of these prompts. And I think the same might be true of Planet Unknown. And it kind of is the same thing as like the Raiders of the North Sea. Like they just it hits you over the head with what's fun about it from like the first turn.
Yep. I will say if you're buying a game for someone who you think will be turned off by tracks, Planet Unknown wouldn't be a good hit, but Terraforming Mars, Track City. So
Yeah.
this
I
person's
really
they're all in.
zeroed in on that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good jumping off point. Okay, wait, did you read the last prompt or
Yes.
did I?
Your
Okay,
turn.
so my turn. So this one is for a college student, a daughter, who wants a game that is fun, easy to teach, and not too serious, and is not threatening for non-hobby gamers. QR is a plus, and they also said that their recommendation is Go Nuts for Donuts, which is kind of nice to give us a little jumping off point. And Go Nuts for Donuts is sort of like Sushi Go Plus, I believe. It's not quite the same, but it's another set collection card game where you're trying to collect different types of donuts that have these sort of different scoring conditions.
So my recommendation for this one is Can't Stop. It doesn't necessarily have like the cutest art, but what it is like a very fun game that I think would get a lot of mileage. That I think I would have got a lot of mileage out of as a college student. I don't know anything about this person's daughter, and I'll just assume that they are only spending time studying and going to classes. But when I wanted to appeal to my less motivated friends and get them to play a game in college, playing something that could be quickly pivoted into a drinking game was a good way to sell that experience. And I think Can't Stop is kind of like a
So like when you
perfect
bust, is
drinking
that the
game.
game?
Yeah, you bust,
Yeah.
take a drink.
Okay. Okay.
Or whatever, get to the top of a track, give out a drink, or
Both.
maybe give out drinks equal to the number of that you got to the top of the track of. Like, Can't Stop is a perfect drinking game. And I think the other thing that it is it's fun, incredibly easy to teach, and I think not threatening to non-hobby gamers, right? You
Totally.
look at this board, it's like we're basically playing Yahtzee here, but it's fun.
Nice. Okay, I have two again because apparently I can't just recommend one game, which is ironic given that the first name of my game is Just One. Okay, so Just One doesn't really have
It's a
cute art.
great recommendation.
It's a charming little box that you could pull out with anyone, not threatening to non-hobby gamers at all. And it's a word game in which one person is the guesser and they know nothing, and everyone else are the clue givers, and they all have a word that they're trying to get the clue guesser to guess. So let's say it's pomegranate. Everyone at the table would have to write just one word that will make the guesser think of pomegranate when they read all the words at the table. But if you give the same clue as someone else, well, then those cancel themselves out. So then the guesser is left with only the uncanceled out words that were written by just one person. Just One's a really fun game because the score doesn't matter. It creates memorable moments. It's funny. It makes you feel connected with the group you're playing with. And you can play it for as little or as long as you want.
Can I give a quick Can't Stop anecdote to talk about why it's like just such an incredible game?
Yeah, for sure.
So I recently at work, I went to a convening as a presenter, presenting on what else, like why it's important to play games at work.
Mhm.
And because I'm such a genius, took my 1 hour slot and I presented for 30 minutes. And for the remainder of the 30 minutes with a captive audience, I broke them into 5 different groups and taught them all how to play
Just One.
Just One. Did I say why
You
Can't
did
Stop?
before.
Yeah, I meant to say
Yeah.
Just One. So I
Okay.
taught them all how to play Just One. I was wondering why you give me such an incredulous look. No.
I was here for it. I wanted to hear how great Can't Stop was, but
Yeah, Just One. Yeah, so I broke them into groups and taught them all how to play Just One. So people who
Okay.
did not know each other, people who are not hobby board gamers, and just like to a T, every single person had
Loved it.
the
Yeah.
best time playing Just One. So many people are like, I'm buying this for my family, like right now. At the end of one of the sessions I did, everybody's just like feverishly playing this game, and I have like a couple minutes before the session's over, so I like stand up, like, excuse me, like I just wanted to say, thanks so much for coming to my session. And some person stands up in the back room, a gentleman who I was kind of looking at him as I was speaking. I was like, I'm not winning this guy over. Like, he does
Yeah.
not think we should be playing more games at work, which was my big thesis. And that guy yells over me, is like, we're kind of busy here.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, I think Just One is a great recommendation for this person, and probably for any person that likes word games, any person that is just looking for like a fun social activity, especially in the non-gamer variety.
My 2024 resolution is getting a game played at work like Jake. That's the greatest. Can I give one more quick recommendation
please
for this,
do.
Jake? Okay, so I think Just One is on the most approachable end of the spectrum. You could buy that game for your daughter. She could have it in her college dorm room and pull it out at any point in time, or even if it wasn't a dorm room, and just know that it would hit. But if she had a group of people who were
Really drunk? No. Okay.
Well, not that far. But game inclined, play Can't Stop for that one. But if you're game inclined, maybe a game inclined group of people who could jump in and out. I'm just thinking of like the vibe when I was in college, where I think this game would have gone over really well if it caught the right group, like, a sail to the wind at the right angle. And that's Challengers. Challengers does have cute art. Cute might be in the eye of the beholder, but it's charming, it's fun, it's light, it's approachable, and it's simple. It's built on the core mechanism is kind of war, and you're just drafting a set of cards. You could play with a large group, a small group, meaning if your daughter got a couple people into Challengers, it could be really fun, but it could also turn into something where if she had the potential to play with 8 people, she could still play with them. So I think Challengers is sort of a push game. But I think when I was growing up and in college, a lot of us were playing Super Smash Brothers. Challengers is like Super Smash Brothers on paper. It's just, it's excellent. It's great.
Right. I would be hesitant based on what we know from this prompt to recommend Challengers to this person, just because I don't think it passes not threatening to non-hobby gamers.
You don't think so? It's so close. Isn't it so close?
It's close, but like you still have to do like a 15 or 20-minute rules teach, and like
Jake, you taught it to me being like, it's war, just like a 5-minute teach. Get it done. All 8 of us played it. It was great.
Just for me, I feel like it possibly is slightly, but I love recommending Challengers to people listening to this. I think if you have somebody in your life who's like, in the high school to college age that likes playing games, then I think Challengers is like, especially if they're in a place like a high school club or college where there's a lot of peers around. I mean, I with you 100%. Like, I would have loved to have active Challengers in college, but I'm also like went to like a Friday night Magics in college.
Totally. Yeah,
like
fair.
A bit of a different vibe. Okay, let's jump to the next one. I have a friend who's looking for games that illustrate mathematical concepts or can help with preserving cognition in people where it's fading, or illuminate disability issues, or help extend our imagination to show us how other people are different.
Okay, there's a lot in this prompt, and
I think great prompt.
It's a great prompt, and no one game could ever sort of meet all of these different criteria, I don't think.
Except for mine. But go ahead. I'm just kidding.
Here we go. Mine. So the first game I'm going to recommend is Set. Set is it's sort of a pattern recognition game played in real time that came out in the 80s that is just a favorite of my family, of my wife's family and her camp friend group that she's been friends with since she was a teenager. So for going on, 25 plus years now. And the way it works is there's a deck of cards that show these different patterns in one of 3 different colors. And also they can come in different values. And you lay out a grid of them on the table, and everyone at the table is trying to identify a set, 3 cards that match in different ways. They might all be the same color. They may all be the same shape of the same number, or they might be one of the same color, but also, one of that shape, and then 2 of that shape, and then 3 of that shape. Set really pushes your brain, and I think is a nice puzzle to wrap your head around that ends up being communal in a way. It helps you show how people can see things differently, the same thing, while also probably preserving cognition. I'm not a neurologist, but I imagine playing this game is good for your brain.
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of research about that for the same presentation, and I think I don't think there's like clear information about like what type of game is good for learning, but rather like there is fairly compelling evidence that like engaging in play is
good for your brain.
So I think the thing that I would say is, finding the game that somebody enjoys playing, is like willing to play, especially as they're aging, that's what I would want to aim for. But yeah, I think those are great recommendations. Those are making me think of other games that I didn't initially consider, like a game like Anomia, maybe, where the game where you're like flipping up cards and like yelling out a shared trait between them, or Spot It, where you're just trying to spot the matching icon on cards. Stuff like that could be really good just for quick to learn. And I think because you mentioned it last time, for a game that shows us how other people are different, Just One is great for that. It's amazing to see how different people interpret clues and come up with great clues that you just yourself never had even thought of.
I also think we already talked about it just the last prompt, but Can't Stop could work really well for this person. If you're doing this sort of light math, it plays off Yahtzee, like you said. You're rolling dice, and I think it's encouraging you to just engage with this sort of like mental arithmetic faculties that would get you, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's like doing some reps of doing some push-ups for your brain.
Yeah. And you're basically making the case for me for mine, which is Claim It.
Great.
A cousin to Can't
Can't
Stop.
stop with a spatial element.
It has a really good spatial element. So I think, it basically is like, how do grids work, the game? Or how do correspondence work? But it's, very simple game where you're trying to roll dice, see where the correspondence align on a grid, and you can claim that space. And you're trying to have the most space claimed at the end. If you ever roll and can't make a placement, then you bust. And that's basically as simple as the game is. It's a really fun game. I like it personally a bit more than Can't Stop, but it's playing in that exact same decision space. I don't know that it meets our requirement of being available not on eBay, but it is available all over the place, used for like as cheap as $10.
Nice.
So you can definitely get this one readily, and I highly recommend it. But what a great prompt. And I think all of these that we mentioned are potentials to consider for people in your life.
Awesome. Okay, the next prompt, Jake, I'm
Is it-
realizing we might have to start zipping just so we can recommend to all these people.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We have a lot.
Okay, I'm
That's
starting
all right,
this
because
prompt.
we ramble for like 10 minutes. We're going to like cut that.
Okay. But not all of it, right? Some of it was pretty good.
Okay, we'll keep some of it.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
we're going to put this all in video for our patrons, and they'll see it all.
They'll see it all. Nice. Okay. Great. I'm always on the lookout for all ages games that will work for ages 5 to 105 years old and up. So, Jake, what would you recommend for an all ages game?
The game I included to recommend is Draftasaurus. And I was thinking about that Sushi Go example that anecdote I mentioned earlier about my colleague feeling like Sushi Go is strategically just out of reach for their 5-year-old. And I think that Draftasaurus is in such a similar space, but is just easier, and also maybe perhaps a little bit more fun for young people as well, because it is a drafting game, but instead of drafting cards, you're drafting dinosaur shaped meeples, and then each turn putting one out onto your board. So it has that same exact structure of drafting, then revealing some information to your opponents. You're trying to collect, maybe same dinosaurs to go in one pen and different dinosaurs to go in another. The concepts are dead simple, and I think that it is a game that is simple enough for a 5-year-old, and even if they're not fully getting it strategically, they'll probably have a good time just grabbing dinosaurs and putting them out on their board, and fun enough that you can play it as an adult.
Nice. And my recommendation is a dexterity game that my nearly 2.5-year-old, but not quite 2.5-year-old, not even, he's like 2.25, has been playing a little bit. And by playing, I mean interacting with the core function, which is good enough for a 2.5-year-old. We like a 5-year-old, easy. And it's Coconuts. Coconuts is a game in which you have this is a toy game, basically. You have these little plastic monkeys that you're using to flick coconuts into these little cups that are laid out on the table in front of all of you. Coconuts is hilarious, and I think games that are just funny work well for all ages. And also, I think it's something, no matter what your sort of hand dexterity is, like most people, I think even as you get older, could probably manage the coconuts. And it's kind of about flicking the monkeys to throw the coconuts. And it's all about zany fun in a way that just like you're just there to laugh. So that's my recommendation.
Nice. That's a great one. Okay, let's move right along. So this is a not serious one. So it says not being serious in parentheses. So I have these friends who insist that they hate board games, but I know that's just because they haven't been introduced to the right games by someone like me who is clearly not a nerd. What would you suggest? Wingspan? Question mark.
Okay, Jake, let's do it on 3, okay? 1,
Okay.
2, 3,
None of
none.
them. Don't get them a game. Yeah. I appreciate this question being asked, because I think this is a thought that's certainly gone through my head, and I imagine it has for many of our listeners as well, of like, yeah, this person doesn't really not like games because games are so awesome. How is that even possible? But if you have somebody who's told you, especially if they've told you repeatedly that games aren't really for them, then you should probably believe them. and
Yeah.
not waste your money in their time and effort having them pretend to thank you for something that they're never going to use.
And this is a follow-up from that same person, I believe, saying, being serious this time, I'm not sure for what recommendation request is Dixit the answer to. So this is like a Jeopardy-style inversion. But I'd like to hear more of those recommendations, if that makes any sense. It does. So basically the prompt is, if you... Oh, Jake's in.
What is Mysterium?
Great. And my recommendation for someone who likes Dixit is I think you should just play Celebrity.
That's good too.
Okay.
Yeah, I was leaning more into the art, and I do want to say, if you like Dixit, Mysterium is a great game of interpreting art on cards. And there's a newer, smaller box version called Mysterium Park, which is essentially the same game with a little bit of a simpler setup. And it is probably the recommendation I would give here, unless you really want like the thematic components offered in the base game.
Totally. And Celebrity is a folk game. You could just Google Celebrity. People also call it Time's Up. There's also a boxed version called Monikers that you could just look up the rules. It's super fun. It basically, you have a set of things you're trying to get your team to guess. The first round, you can say anything except for what's written on it. The second round, you can only say one word. And the third round, you can only gesture. It's a blast. And it honestly blows most games you can buy out of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who likes to play the same old classics all the time. It's very hard to get them to break out of their rut. Puerto Rico, Alhambra, Ticket to Ride, Robo Rally, Power Grid, etc. Almost anything from 1999 to 2012 seems great. What is a more modern game than that I might get them that they would still like?
Okay, Jake, I will say I snuck a look at your answer and I almost gave that answer. But my recommendations are either Renature, a tile-laying area control game by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling that feels like a classic Euro. Babylonia, a tile-laying game by Rainer Knizia that feels like a classic Euro, but came out just recently that I adore. Or if you want to push them, the classic with a modern flair, you could also consider Vadis, a beautiful recently released game that was first published in the early 2000s, and I think might be a real home run for them if they're into sort of this classic lighter fare that fills a full evening. I think the combination or the sort of connecting factors between a lot of these are the fact that they're a little bit lighter, but they have that full game experience. And Vadis really ticks that box too.
Yeah, I love this prompt too, because I feel like a lot of us in this hobby probably have somebody in our extended game groups that fits this category. So I feel like this is like your secret Santa gift advice if you've got that person. And so I co-sign all of those, Brendan. I think those are all great recommendation for games that for many of us, like the gamer in their life, would be excited to open any of those on as a gift. And my recommendation, I think, is a no-brainer here. It's Findorff. So Findorff is a Freedom and Friesa game design of Power Grid fame referenced here. And I think it might be an easy transition in that it looks just like Power Grid, and it has the same kind of Power Grid style economy of resources, a resource economy. And I think it also does a great job of introducing some more modern feel in that it has a really quick micro-turn system where you're just doing one quick action and things just whip around the table. So it feels like it has just a faster tempo, I think, than a lot of those other games listed. And yet it still looks and feels like a very classic design from a classic game designer. It's one I really like, and I think has kind of been passed over by the board game hive mind. So I'm excited to give it a little more attention on this podcast.
And it's not too long, too.
No, it's like an hour with like 5 people.
Yep.
But when you look at it, it's hard to believe because it looks like one of these old games that you think like that's probably 2 hours.
Yep.
All right, next. My brother-in-law, or it's your turn to read it.
Oh, is it? No, I think it's yours.
Okay. My brother-in-law.
Wait, is that? Wait.
Well, you answered the last one first, so I was deducing backwards.
My brother-in-law doesn't. Sorry. Okay. My brother-in-law doesn't have a large game collection, but has enjoyed every hobby game I've showed him. We've given games to each other in the past, and the biggest hit for him so far has been Cascadia. He's more likely to get lighter games tabled. He's a fan of nature themes and also plays Dungeons and Dragons. His partner is not too into games, but she likes word guessing games like Codenames and Concept. What's a good game for him and a game that the two of them would like to play together?
My recommendation for him and this couple is Paperback. It's a
Mm,
it's a deck building game that uses it's like a deck builder slash word game. So you're building a personal deck of cards by buying letters, and then on each turn you'll be creating a word with the letters in your hand to earn money, buy more valuable letters, and ultimately earn achievements that will score you end game victory points. I think it sounds like the partner of the brother-in-law in this prompt is really only into word games and kind of that type of vibe. So I wouldn't want to stray too far out of their comfort zone. I fear that giving this gift, we don't want that then assuming the time of somebody else that might not be as excited about it. So I think like going for a word game, this isn't a guessing game, but is going to be something that is familiar enough to maybe make that person excited. And I think it has also fun kind of gamer elements as well of deck building that, a gaming person, somebody who's maybe getting more excited about games will find a lot of interest in and enjoyment in. So that's my
nice.
recommendation, Paperback.
I think Paperback is perfect because you covered one part of the spectrum, and I'm going to cover the sort of continuation off of Cascadia, in which this brother-in-law could play with their partner, but maybe only if they were feeling so inclined, which is the Isle of Cats. The Isle of Cats is another polyomino laying game that's also a light drafting game. It's just a little bit of a step up from Cascadia, but I think a fun game that is really engaging. It rewards repeat plays, and seems to me, just based on what I hear about this brother-in-law, that he would really dig.
Awesome. Next one, 12 and 14-year-old nieces, their sisters, like to play Dixit, Gem Dealer, a random Knizia game that this person gave them, and Catan with two of their friends, and sometimes just with themselves. I was thinking of maybe Splendor or Azul as they work from 2 to 4, but wonder if something lighter might be better.
I am really intrigued. So part of me wants to recommend Cascadia. I think that might work really well here, which is actually maybe slightly heavier than Splendor or Azul. But I'm actually going to recommend Calico. Calico is another sort of tile laying game but you're only playing in your own personal player space that scales nicely from 2 to 4 players. It's adorable and cute, and it's also, I think, would be really engaging. I don't know. I like Calico. It's a nice puzzle game that I think would allow you to, sometimes I think of like almost teenage siblings as being a little potential fight prone, and Calico almost prevents that. It wouldn't go there. But what's your recommendation, Jake?
Yeah,
Yours might beat me in
that's
this.
funny because mine, I also went heavier than Splendor or
Okay.
Azul, which I think maybe, if they're 12 and 14-year-olds and they're playing Catan with their friends,
They
like I
could do
think,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
they can do it for sure. I'm not worried about lightness at all.
Yeah.
And my recommendation is Potion Explosion. I think Potion Explosion is like a really fun kind of a game where you are putting marbles into a potion dispenser in order to collect potions or in order to collect ingredients, the marbles, and fill potions to cast spells and earn points. I think it's a really fun game. I think it has a good kind of toy factor as well, and I suspect that it might kind of be a nice cross between sort of the fanciful fun of Dixit and the more strategic gameplay of Catan, and it also just has like a great toy factor, which I think would make it like a fun gift for younger girls to receive.
Nice. That's awesome. Which means, Jake, you get to read this next one.
Which is the last one.
Yeah.
We're making it to the very end here. And here it is. My girlfriend really likes variable storytelling games, but those all seem to be horror oriented. Do you have any suggestions that give you the adventure of something like Betrayal on at House on the Hill, but no horror elements? The goal would be for us to play with younger kids too.
Jake, this is a really hard one because the two of us, I would say, are not super into variable storytelling games.
Yeah, this was outside of my wheelhouse, and I had to tell you,
Phone a friend.
yeah, let's phone a friend. So I posed this question into our Decision Space Discord for more knowledgeable folks to answer, and I think we got a perfect answer from friend of the show, Tony Faber.
Nice.
And he said, Sleeping Gods is great for an overarching story, but requires a lot of table space and rules overhead. So if those things are an issue, you might try the new Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril, which is a much shorter version, though not quite out yet. So let's set those aside. If the girlfriend has a goofy sense of humor and likes pirate theme, Forgotten Waters is a blast. And I think Forgotten Waters is my recommendation for this couple. It is a kind of a Mad Libs driven storytelling game where or narrative storytelling game where you'll be filling out prompts, naming your characters, and going on kind of like a silly adventure with your friends. I haven't played it myself, but it sounds exactly like the kind of like goofy hijinks that you might be looking for, and I think especially well suited for bringing kids into as well.
Nice. And I think, honestly, that's going to cover the decision space recommendation on that prompt. But Jake, can we do one bonus question to end the episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
Did you get a chance to look at it before I'm asking you this right off the cuff?
No.
Great. What would you give your dad as a gift?
Oh man. My dad loves sports. I'm thinking through this. He loves sports. He loves playing poker. Does not like playing board games with me. So
Pretty explicitly.
Yeah. He likes something that has like a high toy factor though. I don't even know what this game is called. I think a game like Viking Seesaw that I played, where you're kind of like trying to balance little objects onto like a teeter totter and try and not get it to topple over. Something like that would be a big hit. I think that might be too small. Like the production kind of didn't work for me because of how small and fiddly it was. I've seen people playing this game that looks like a giant hamster wheel where they're trying to like balance things on like inner shelves inside of it and try not get it to roll over. That something like that I think would be a big hit. I think my dad might
game.
Yeah. So, or I bet my dad might really dig Crokinole.
Oh, I was gonna. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So maybe I should get my dad a Crokinole board for the basement or something. When he was younger, we had a foosball table and like a ping pong table in our basement, and he would just like whip me and my sister's ass at it every time. He's got like a dexterity kind of game itch.
That's awesome.
That he's probably been neglecting. So yeah, maybe that actually gives me an honestly like a good idea for a Christmas gift. Maybe I can get my mom and sister in on it and buy them like a nice one.
That's amazing. Jake's just like plotting how we can play 200 games of Crokinole in the next month. Well, I'm gonna give my answer. My dad's like a finance nerd. I would say he just loves markets. They intrigue him, and also cares about the economy. And I'm sticking to the game. So in this instance, right, I said he hasn't played a lot of games in the last 30 years. So if I was buying him a game as a gift, it'd be a game for us to play together. And I think the perfect game that I would love to play with him and anyone else in my family who would put up with us is QE. Quantitative easing. QE is this sort of auction game in which you are bidding with whatever you write down is your bid, but the caveat is that if you bid the most, you can't win. So you might start by the auctions going for $1,000 or $5,000, and by the end of the game, your people at the table are bidding $5 million or something like that to try to win these lots. I think it would go over really well, and he just find it really clever and interesting and fun. So yeah. QE, a sort of lightish auction game that might appeal to someone else's dad out there as well if they're into finance.
Nice. And Brendan, before we close out, I want to like leave the door open. Are there any games that you think like just make that are just like on your mind? Like maybe you would give this out as a gift this year, or you just think are good recommendations that people listening to this show should know and consider? I have a couple, so I can go first if you need some time.
Yeah, go first, and then I'll jump in.
Well, first, I just want to give a quick caveat that Jamie at Stonemeyer Games is a good friend of mine, but I do want to mention Wingspan as like a game that, don't forget, it exists this holiday season. I think it's just been a huge piece of introducing tons of new folks to the hobby. I think it's something that's really approachable for couples to play together. I think sometimes, especially if we're like deep in this hobby, we might overthink this a bit, and it might be okay just like keep it simple. If a couple maybe asked you for a board game and has shown interest in it, I think that is one for many people, even if it might not be your very favorite game. Another one I wanted to mention is Sea Salt and Paper. I think like such a perfect stocking stuffer size game. I think it's $12 at Miniature Market. I've been playing it a little bit on Board Game Arena. It's a very simple card game that you can just kind of play rounds of it. I think it's a blast. I think it's incredibly well done, and it has very striking origami photography as its art. So it just looks different. It's just a really nice object. And I think that's one. It's already a game I've given out once this year, and I think it's one that I'll be giving out to other folks as well.
So I think if you know someone who a World War II themed card game would not be a turnoff or would excite them, Air, Land, and Sea is an awesome little stocking stuffer type game. It's a simple card game just with less than 50 cards that you play over a few rounds where you're trying to vie for control of 3 different districts: the air, the land, and the sea. I should call them theaters. I think that's the official term in this thematic context. But Air, Land, and Sea is great. And I think this is the kind of game, Jake, where I can imagine if you bought this for the right person, you could just steal away for 45 minutes and have an awesome time playing this quick little card game and make a really fun memory on a holiday event. I also want to mention Blue Lagoon. Blue Lagoon is a simple tile-laying game in which you're playing these little pieces that are yours across all of these sort of different, this archipelago.
I think we've both been struggling pronouncing things on this episode, but that's okay.
That's good. An archipelago. In front of you, trying to collect different things and sort of achieve these different scoring conditions. It's simple enough that you could teach it to pretty much anyone. It costs $30. I think this is another really fun game where if you had a family who liked playing games together at the holidays but hadn't played a lot of modern board games, Blue Lagoon would be a great one to introduce to them as sort of like a check out this game.
Awesome. All right. Well, I can't think of anything else. So,
what about So Clover?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's so many great games. I think Just One, So Clover, perfect examples that are just going to be big hits for a lot of people. And then, I mean, of course, there's like classics, right? Like Ticket to Ride is an awesome gateway to the hobby. I think King Domino is an awesome gateway to the hobby. Azul is an awesome family game. Like, these kind of evergreen games are evergreen for a reason because people are, continuing to enjoy them. So I think those are all good examples, especially for people who might be like asking you, hey, you're a big board gamer. What should I look at this year? I think all of those are games that make sense to look at this year and probably every year moving forward for good reason. But Brendan, what do you say we leave it there? Or why don't we say this? Let's continue this conversation in our Discord. I think if people listening to this episode have a specific person in their mind that we maybe didn't answer directly here, please come to the Discord and ask us, and we'll give you our thoughts there. And even better than that, bunches of other people who hang out with us in the Discord will be able to chime in and think of great games that we're neglecting to think of as well.
I'll also say, if you're interested in more things Decision Space, check us out on decisionspacepodcast.com, where obviously, it was mentioned in the review that we have a big backlog. There's actually 147 episodes of this show now. That's a lot. In the next few weeks, if you have a little more free time on your hands and you want to delve into our backlog, I really, please do. We'd love it. And then coming up will be, Jake, can you believe we're going to be covering our favorite games of 2023 that we covered on the show at some point in the next 4 weeks? That's mind-boggling. We're here again.
That is crazy.
Get your felt bell ready.
Yeah, we have to think about that because we're covering like fewer deep dives at a certain point, but
yeah. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
It'll be awesome. Yeah, our year-end capstone episode coming up.
Also, for all of our pre-planners, know that we're going to cover games like Heat, Ticket to Ride, and Planet Unknown at some point later this year and early next.
Yeah, and we've actually like played all those games a ton, so it's just slotting them in and getting it recorded.
And then also,
they're actually going to happen.
They are. And I want to say you can follow us on Instagram. Just search Decision Space Podcast there. And then also, thank you to Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out. So with that,
happy holidays, and don't give games to people who don't want them.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.